Okay, this is another really quick video on a specific module uh, within Python, and that is the datetime module. It has a lot of functions that allow you to do manipulation on dates and perform calculation dates. So what I am going to show you here is I'm logged into the Unix machine I've been using for these videos, and I'm going to look at a program that I call DatetimeTest.py. So here's my code. Of course, I start with the pound bang notation so that I make sure I get Python 3.11. And then this looks a little different. There's a datetime module that has a datetime class in it. So instead of just saying import datetime, which will work, but then you would have to give longer module or path names to methods within the module. So I'm importing from datetime a class called datetime, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to first show you how to get the current date and time. Now, just kind of a side note, I think most of the things in Python are really good improvements on things that were in Perl, which I used to teach. Unfortunately, this datetime module in Python is not as good as the date : manip module that you can, or library that you can use in Perl. That library, you could just send a date in that was pretty much in any format. Maybe it had the time, maybe it didn't, maybe things were spelled out, maybe they were numbers, maybe it was British style date, maybe it was US style date, and the date parse method in that library would just parse it. Now, unfortunately, in Python, we have to give a format string, basically. So what I'm telling it is I want date time, I want now, which is the current time, and I want it formatted in day, month, year, space, hours, minutes, seconds. So I have to tell how I want it formatted, and there's lots of different formats that you can use. Now then, what I'm doing is I'm parsing some strings that are common format for a Unix system. So the first string I want to parse is June 2nd, 1997 at 3:56 p.m. and 58 seconds. So the string, I have the date I'm going to parse, and prior to that, the date format, I'm telling what format this is in. Now then, within this datetime module, this example is going to use two different types of objects. One of them is string ptime, or I'm sorry, string ptime is going to give me a datetime object. So here, date 1 is going to be a datetime object. I'm going to get that by giving me the string parsed time of string 1 using my date format string. And then what I have here is I'm going to print out the type of date 1 to show you that it's datetime.datetime, so it's a datetime object. I'm going to do the same thing with string 2. So date 2 is also going to be a datetime object. Now then, there's another type of object that is referred to as a delta. And a delta can be used for adding or subtracting a certain amount of time from a date, or as I've used it here, I can use a subtraction. I can say take date 2, subtract date 1 from it, and I'm going to get a delta, which is the difference between those two dates. And then I'm going to print out that delta, or the answer, or the result of evaluating that expression. So now if I run this program, what it's going to do is, here it gives me the current date and time. So May 9th, 2023 at 3:57 p.m. and 24 seconds. Here it says the type of date 1 is class datetime.datetime. So that's where you have kind of the what I would call a double identifier. It's unfortunate that they did it that way, because it makes the import line possibly a little bit confusing to somebody that's not real familiar with Python. Now then, I parsed date 2, so I printed that out. Unfortunately, I think I deleted the line that prints out date 1, but it is basically this June 2nd, 1997 date in this format. And then I did a subtraction and calculated a delta. Now, the delta between these two dates was 942 days, 8 hours, 3 minutes, and 2 seconds. This is another thing that's a little bit different from the Perl module, the date manip module that I'm used to working with, is you can get years, weeks, well, I guess it's years, months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, seconds. So in Python, for whatever reason, the person that created this module decided that you just needed days. So if you need to break that down, I have a solution that shows how to break this down into years and months. But you're going to have to use division, integer division, truncate fractional parts off. Then once you do that, perform a calculation to find out how many, if you were doing years, then you would have to figure out how many months were left, and then how many weeks were left, and then how many days were left. So to break that down from days into years, months, weeks, and days takes a handful of well thought out calculations to figure that out. But that's just a real brief introduction of the Python date time module.